Well, yeah, it's been a crazy journey. If you went back to me back in high school with my little tutoring business and said, "Hey, one day you're going to be the CEO of a company on the other side of the world. It's going to be 500 people." Never would have guessed, but that's the interesting aspect of the entrepreneurial journey. You never know where the path will take you.
Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. I'm Richard Metcalf, founder of X Quadrant, and my mission is to help the world's top CEOs and entrepreneurs shift from incremental to exponential progress and create a huge positive impact on our world. Now, that requires you to reinvent yourself and transform your business. So, if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO.
Brad, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here today.
Thanks, Richard. Super excited here. It's an early morning here in Atlanta, but excited to kick it off with a couple cups of coffee and talk the topics.
Yeah, well, let's do this. So what I know about you is that you've built your business, Outsource Access, amongst other things, with impact at the heart. You're a Real Leaders Impact Award winner. I know you've orientated your business around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I also know that you're a serial entrepreneur. You've built businesses since you were practically, in the cradle, from what I understand. So when did purpose and impact become front and center to how you wanted to build businesses? And what was the pivotal moment, perhaps, where you decided, yeah, this is important?
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me, and love to speak on this topic. And I think you see a lot of entrepreneurs kind of wanting to pursue more of this path and looking for a direction. Hopefully, some of our conversation here will help them find that path. And for me, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, had a whiteboard hanging over the fireplace growing up. So there was always ideas flying around. So I kind of was engaged in it early on, and had a toy rental business in third grade and a tutoring company in high school. Actually came over your direction, the UK, in high school. We actually had a business where we did partner with a company in London and the UK to trade products back and forth. But I would say purpose and impact. It's part of it I was just brought up around it in my family, and kind of giving back and having an impact in a community was something that I always saw kind of around me and in my family. And I'd say maybe one of the first specific initiatives that we did, I did around as a young entrepreneur, was around breast cancer. And so a buddy of mine, we enjoy skeet shooting, shooting clays, and also enjoy good barbecue. And so he and I just had a connection with a local organization in our city that helped provide prosthetics for women that were going through breast cancer and different elements related to the disease. It's just significant and a big issue that a lot of women navigate. And so we ended up, taking this annual event we were doing and turning this big skeet shooting event into a major fundraising effort for breast cancer. We did for 5 years in a row. And it was just, I think that was the first thing that I did. I was a growing entrepreneur, and we can talk about that, kind of where all that started after college and began my first company. But it was in my 20s, I had an opportunity to do that. And so it just was really impactful in seeing the impact we were making for that organization, and being able to give that check to that woman, and all of our friends in our community rallying around that initiative to raise money. And so they would come and be an all-day barbecue and skeet shooting event and so forth. We were raising funds. So I can speak more to how it kind of translated, but I would say that's one of the big first initiatives I personally took on with a good buddy of mine, Kyle, kind of early on, and saw the taste of it and wanted to kind of find more ways to drive that forward.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you just kind of got started. There was some initiative, some opportunity you were able to get involved with, and you just got the bug because of that. It felt good. You were getting support from people, kind of wanted to double down on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I just think I had a family that it was always top of mind within our family of doing and having, efforts to give back in the community and to support. And this is the first initiative that I was able to personally take on, with my friend Kyle, to actually put on, develop, and see it kind of start to finish, and see the impact, and to really see a whole community rally around that common topic and wanting to help support. So yeah, it was a great kind of kicking off point that led to a lot of other things.
Well, let me go back a bit, because presumably as you did those early businesses, I guess what I'm trying to dig into is, did you always have that same intentionality around purpose and making an impact? Because I can kind of get it, when you're younger on, you might say, I just need to make some money at this point. Was that the focus, or were you always trying to weave this in from day one? Or is it something which has been evolving in your own consciousness over the last few years?
Well, I'd say they go, look back at and go hand in hand. I mean, I have to say my first business technically was third, fourth grade, where I was born in 1979, and one of the toys were called micro machines, these little tiny toys and cars, and so I would always ask for them for Christmas and birthdays and so forth, and amassed a collection of hundred of them. And for the audience that knows, a Crown Royal that come in the little purple velvet bags. For some reason, my parents enjoyed that beverage, so they had some extra ones sitting around. So that's what I put all of my toys in. I would carry them into third, fourth grade and rent them to my friends. And I actually still have the whole playbook that I ran. I had a VP of marketing, a VP of sales. I had a newsletter I did out on a typewriter. So I wouldn't say there was quite as much purpose and impact related to that initiative. That was sort of just generating. I think I was making a penny a night that we would rent them out to people. But that was my first kind of initiative. But I enjoyed the sense of involving others. I mean, literally, my best friend, I remember her name, Winter Hawkins, was my VP of marketing, VP of sales in third, fourth grade, and I enjoyed the camaraderie of building and growing together. But then when I got into high school, one of the ways I my second business, I guess, the way I would kind of make money during the summers was very, I guess, tied to impact as well. As I would go to all the middle school counselors and say, hey, which children, are struggling with math, either need to have tutoring or ones that are, they're trying to maybe skip, a level. And then I would go to all my teachers and say, hey, can you give me all your workbooks and worksheets and so forth? And so I started a tutoring business where I would help and support those kids and work with them through the summers to help them get up to speed or to kind of be able to progress as they stepped into the next year. And I loved that. I mean, I've always had a passion for education. I ended up marrying a teacher who was a teacher for 13 years as well. But just working with youth and children, and that translates into a lot of things I'm doing still as well. So it was a for-profit entity, my tutoring little business there during the summers, but it was also an opportunity of making impact on these young kids and helping them navigate through. And you see in their eyes that they connect, or you can share with them an idea or perspective differently that they hadn't seen before. It's pretty rewarding.
Beautiful. So let's fast forward to Outsource Access, which is a offshore virtual services firm that I know you set up probably 5 or 6 years ago now, if I remember correctly. I believe if you scaled it during middle of COVID, whatever, to 500 employees. And the way you want to go is get it to, I think you said 40,000 employees in 10 years. So kind of what I'm interested about is, why is that goal so important to you, right? Why is getting to 40,000 employees? I think you want to double it this year to 1,000. So why is that kind of growth in employee headcount so important?
Sure. Well, yeah, it's been a crazy journey. If you went back to me back in high school with my little tutoring business and said, hey, one day you're going to be the CEO of a company on the other side of the world, it's going to be 500 people, never would have guessed. But, that's the interesting aspect of the entrepreneurial journey. You never know where the path will take you. And so, yeah, this current company, Outsource Access, to tie to sort of what my goal and objective is, kind of is tied back to sort of the brief beginnings of it, and to briefly share. Before I started this company, my last business, we manufactured and distributed teeth whitening products all over the world, and ended up having a product disaster happen. One of our products that we had done thousands of units, one of our manufacturers changed a component, and we ended up sending about 10,000 kind of defective products all over the world. And cash got tight, things got lean, and I had to learn about this whole offshore outsourcing gig economy world to really help save the business. And so, in that journey, I ended up being educated about it and learning about working with these resources and individuals. And in the process, ended up working with this young woman named Jaisel over in the Philippines, and 22, 23 years old, and grew up in a small, just very humble village. And I found her on this job board and started working with her. And I just had all my doubt, fears, and concerns about it. And the young woman just blew me away. I mean, she came from such humble beginnings. I mean, she did have a college degree, but just in a very small town, literally dirt floors, and just saw her ability to support me. And here I was, a small to medium business owner in the United States, trying to grow and make my business work. And I was able to get an affordable resource. And then she was making more money she'd ever made before by what I was paying her. So it was kind of this win-win experience. And I was like, wow, did I get a unique situation here? And then I hired a second and a third. And I found that if you treat people well and you create a career path and opportunity, for them, that it can be replicated. And so funny enough, that young woman who we started with, I mean, the business is 4 years old as of a couple months ago, and we've grown to 500 employees in 4 years. And that young woman who was 22, 23 is now my COO, president of the entire organization. So I share all that in that seeing the career path and opportunity it's created for her. I mean, she actually just, got married not too long ago, was able to build a home from scratch, which is kind of unheard of in a lot of times, and actually bought an investment property. And we've seen that with other employees that we've ended up hiring. I got a picture from one of our managers that, showed a picture of a car, and he was actually he didn't buy one for himself. And this is how humble and forward thinking the Filipinos are. He bought a car for his parents. And he said, this is the first time any me or any of my friends have been able to kind of do this. So seeing that journey, and about 2 months after I started working with JCell in the very beginning, she sent me a picture of this village and these young children with a set of shoes in a circle. And she said, Brad, I just want you to know, because of the money I'm making with you in the opportunity, I'm able to go buy all these shoes for these children who have to go walk, an hour and a half back and forth to school every single day. And for me, it just connected the dots, and it was just a win, 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 win for me, for her. And then she was even giving back into her community. And I said, Jess, I don't know where this whole business is going to go. And at that point we had 3 or 4 people, but I want to create something, harking back to sort of my give back things that I did with the breast cancer initiative and so forth, is how can we weave that into this business? I don't know where we're going to grow this business, JCell, but I want to do something around that. And so we ended up making that a big part of our initiative going forward, is investing in the community. And at about the same time, I got a chance to do a think tank at the headquarters of the United Nations. So I'm a part of a group called Entrepreneurs Organization, and brought about 200 entrepreneurs to the headquarters of the United Nations to understand about the Sustainable Development Goals, which I didn't even know anything about before beginning this process. And just realized it was a framework, these 17 Sustainable Development Goals that touch everything related to our planet and humanity, that creates a framework of how you can have purpose and impact. So took that framework, brought it back to our team, and I said, hey, as we grow, so we hired a full-time person. So every quarter we interview our employees and ask them, what do they care most about? Actually, my last trip to the Philippines, they chose life on land. So we went and planted over 150 trees together to offset carbon emissions. So it was weaving in a for-profit business of what we're doing, but also giving back in the community. And when I got a chance to go there recently, and I interviewed probably 20 or 25 of our employees and just asked about their life, their journey, what brought them to us, and just hearing the incredible stories, life-changing stories of these individuals. That's why this is the most passionate I've ever been of anything I've done as an entrepreneur. So to go back to your original question, why that goal is because it is a massive, to your point, a multiplier. When we provide a job for one of our Filipino staff, because we hire them as full-time employees, so we pay their health insurance, pay their benefits, it's providing support for their families. It impacts them, it impacts their children, it impacts everybody in their ecosystem. And then for our clients, I mean, small to medium businesses, a lot of people think this is about, shipping jobs overseas. In reality, you got a business that's growing, maybe they can't even afford an employee locally. So that owner ends up burning out, working 80, 90 hours a week and so forth. Well, we create a release valve of a more affordable option for them that still equally is competent, that they can support them in that journey. So we're seeing big wins on the client side, and then on the employee side, seeing the impact it's making for them. So we get to 40,000 people. That's a lot of multiplication.
Yeah, amazing. I love this this point you said, that every quarter you would actually survey your staff and ask them what do they care about. And so what I heard is you then turn that into an initiative. You actually turn that into something that you can do to make a difference in the community or in the world. So tell me a bit about that. Like, what gave you that idea? Because you're building a business, this new business with just a couple of people to start with. It might not be the first thing on your mind to do that kind of thing, right? Your first thing might be, well, I need to get to scale. I need to get to a certain run rate. I need to kind of stabilize the cash flow. So was this something that came immediately, early on? Why did you decide, or when did you decide, what, this is something I really want to build in to the way that we built this culture?
Well, to be honest, it was from the very beginning. I mean, as I shared, 2 months after I first started working with JCell way back a number of years ago, back before we even launched Outsource Access, and I was just doing a lot of speaking and consulting. And that's a lot of what I've done, is just bringing this message to, the small to medium business community in the US and beyond. Is, 2 months after hiring her, and I saw she shared with me that those shoes she had bought for those children and so forth. And I said, so we started immediately building that into our business. And so I said, hey, how can we do this at a larger scale? And this is before I even did the United Nations stuff. When I saw her do that, I said, how can we do this shoe buying initiative at a much larger scale? And so we ended up going to another local village, and it was so far away. Actually, we had the children actually put their feet down on paper and draw their feet, so we knew their feet sizes. And then our team, and we went ahead and funded. I said, we're going to allocate funds from the very beginning, that we're just going to invest in the community. And so we ended up buying, tons of really nice sneaker shoes, and we bought these journals as well, about putting together their hopes and dreams, kind of going forward. So it was something we did early on. And then after that, I got a chance to do the United Nations initiative, which then created a framework. So we were already doing initiatives early on, and we were investing in the community in different capacities. We bought shoes and educational supplies for these young people in village. I actually have a documentary video I can share with the audience around. It's kind of cool. That kind of shows my whole journey when we went over there back in 2019. But in the Philippines, they tend to have some typhoons, they have some earthquakes, and so an earthquake hit about 8 hours south of where our offices are, and our team dedicated all of our effort. We put together 1,000 sanitary kits and drove our team in their own vehicles, drove 8 hours south to give out and provide sanitary kits. So it just became a fabric of what we did, just because it's the right thing to do, and our employees, I want them to see. A lot of people in these countries that provide offshore outsourcing services. Unfortunately, a lot of companies in some cases don't pay them really well, don't treat them really well, and they don't show how much they appreciate their local community. And so it was important for me, for our employees, to see that, hey, we're not taking advantage. We're actually wanting to double down and invest in your local community. And so I got a chance to do the United Nations initiative. I'm like, okay, well, here's a framework that we can bring to even do this even more, even a more structured way. And then JCL and I got together and I said, hey, can we hire a full-time consultant? Because I want to get our employees even more directly involved. We were kind of choosing different things we wanted to do, and that kind of came up. But I said, I want to intentionally survey our employees to ask them and say, hey, here's what the sustainable development goals are. Here's the 17 categories. What do you care most about? Now, not my personal passion project or what I care about or JCL cares about, but what do all of you care about? And would have them evaluate and submit. And so she would help collate all those results, and then we would then choose a major project based on that. And so zero hunger is one of the sustainable development goals. So during COVID, that was one of the things that was chosen. And so we participated in an initiative called Bags of Hope, where we bought bags of rice and so forth for the trike drivers that were really impacted during COVID in the Philippines. And as I mentioned earlier, life on land was one that it was very important. It's very important to Filipinos in terms of their land and the beautiful country that they have. And so we've planted, I think now on the last trip we did a bunch. And then I think we've done over 300 or 400 trees that we planted in the mangroves to offset carbon emissions. So that's where it started. Our very first relationship, she showing me that picture and seeing that she cared, and it was important to her. And it's always been important to me, and it gave us a framework. So we started doing grassroots work, learned the United Nations, learned the framework, came back. And now every single quarter, it's something that we do. And our staff volunteer their time to go out and do these initiatives.
So if we turn our attention to the business side for a second, obviously to do these initiatives, you need this critical mass. You've got these hundreds of employees now. And I think you said that scaling at the start was quite a challenge, right? I think COVID was hitting and so forth as you were going through this. So what was the secret to growth to get to 500 employees, in 3 and a bit years, doing it during the pandemic and everything else? How did you actually go about to multiply the reach of the business at that point?
Sure. And yeah, it was an interesting. We launched in 2019, and then the pandemic obviously came the first part of 2020. So I'll speak to both two parts. One part is we have to get more clients and businesses that want to engage our services, but then on the other side of it, we have to get more virtual assistants out of the Philippines that want to work for us. So we kind of have to have two. We have two customers really that we're serving because we hire them as full-time employees and bring them together and then manage the whole experience. As far as the business side, very similar to what you're doing here with this podcast and education, is I just did tons and tons of education about this world. A lot of people had read, Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week back, 10, 15 plus years ago. That touched on this concept of you can work with these individuals in other parts of the world, and it's very cost effective and creative things. But it was more like this novelty concept versus a fundamental way that truly, a concrete manufacturing business in Iowa can actually use somebody in the Philippines to do their project management coordination if need be. Or a marketing agency in LA could use 3 Filipinos to actually do project management coordination. So the small to medium business market, large companies have been doing this for years. And most people, when they think of offshore and outsourcing, first of all, they group all of Southeast Asia together, right? There's different elements there, India and others that people have had different experiences. What's unique about the Philippines, which I did a lot of education on in my speaking, is that the U.S. controlled it, up until around 1947, 1950 or so. So it's completely Americanized, completely English speaking, and there's not the culture gap if someone's going to work side by side in your business. And that's what our staff do. Our staff literally feel like they're part of the team within our clients, so they don't have that culture gap. To preconceived notions that people have and understand why the Philippines is different in terms of language and so forth. But then the other education is just everything that people have about what about time zones? What about competency? What about currency? What about security? What about all of these things? So I just had to do a big education, roadshow on it and just explain in my own journey of how I found JCell. And I had all those same doubt, fears, and concerns. And then I started working with her and investing in her growth and seeing her grow and develop and how it kind of evolved. So that's the beginning of us. A lot of our growth was me just doing a massive amount of speaking, thought leadership. I have my own podcast called automatedelegate.com, where I kind of interview people on how they're, automating and delegating. And so that kind of created a lot of ground mass. And then once clients came on board, once an entrepreneur finds that someone's figured this how outsourcing thing out, that it's quality and it's reliable and it's affordable, they want to tell other entrepreneurs. And so, we got tons of referrals. And then the growth from our existing clients was a big part that I wasn't expecting, to be honest, Richard. We would bring people on, they'd start with one, maybe two VAs. And then once they saw the experience, the quality they were getting from us, they're like, wow, you told me how great all this stuff was, but I honestly had a lot of doubts about it. Now I've got confidence in it. Yeah, I'll take a third, a fourth, a fifth. One of our largest clients has close to 80 to 90 staff with us now. So existing client growth was a big part that we weren't expecting. But we're driving all this demand.
Yeah, it's a great catch, because it's not every business has that ability, and perhaps when you were started, you probably were imagining that you might get that extra lever, but it's fantastic, right? You get to expand within your client base as well as bring on new clients, which is obviously extremely fluid and profitable, I'm sure. So,
and one strategic thing I did for listeners, Richard, we had one pivot decision is we were launching and growing. We were about 80 or 90 staff at the end of 2019, and I was about to sign on an office space in the Philippines. And I actually was meeting with my mastermind group I'm a part of, and I said, "Hey, is this COVID thing real? Should I not sign on this office space? We're gonna have an issue." And I chose not to. Thank goodness. And one of the biggest things to our scale as well is that we allow our staff, for the most part, to work virtually from home. We have to make sure they have the proper technology and internet and so forth. But that was a huge critical decision that honestly, COVID was a gift in a way that it forced us to be able to build a distributed workforce where everybody could work from home, so we could build a culture and have a distributed virtual culture. With a lot of companies that require people to come into offices were struggling massively over there. So that was a big critical decision for us. And then on the VA side, back to the point of purpose and impact, we're growing all this demand, but then we needed more virtual assistants to kind of supply it. And all of a sudden, all this demand's coming. But because of how we were treating our people and supporting our people, we had people bringing their friends and family to come work for us. We got some where we literally have 9 or 10 family members that are all working for us, that are cousins and so forth. We even launched a magazine called Virtual Success Magazine, where we would showcase our employees and do whole full magazine write-ups on them and share those at local universities and so forth. But a lot of the purpose and impact stuff we were doing helped that process.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is just a quick interlude to introduce you to 2 transformative programs that we run. The first is Rivendell, my exclusive group of top CEOs who are committed to transforming themselves, their businesses, and the world. It's an incredible peer group and a deep coaching experience that will push you to new heights, no matter how successful you've already been. The second is Impact Accelerator, a coaching program for executives who are ready to make a big leap forward in their own leadership. It's regularly described as life-changing, and no other program provides such personal strategic clarity, a measurable shift in stakeholder perceptions, and a world-class leadership development environment. Find out about both of these programs at xquadrant.com/services. Now back to the conversation.
Brad, let me just interrupt there, because I think it's a really key point. Many clients I work with, people I speak to, have this problem like, I just can't get enough applicants, right? I just can't get enough good talent. And I suppose the question that's coming out from this is, well, how do you actually incentivize, create that word of mouth referral with your existing employees, right? They all know tons of people. Are you doing such a great job with your existing employee experience that they want to bring their friends and family? And I think for anyone listening, there's the whole question of virtual assistants and using that, and I use virtual, have a virtual team, which is great. But no matter what your employee base looks like, if you want to recruit great people, are your people really your best ambassadors? Or are they a bit disgruntled, a bit meh, and perhaps that's the first place to fix, rather than just trying to find an even better recruiter.
Yeah, no doubt. It's we are certainly not perfect, and I want to say we're not perfect by any means, as we were growing so rapidly during COVID, and just it was definitely a challenging, challenging time. Just to be able to support, but we tried to continue to do the right thing and support. I mean, the Philippines being a big Catholic country as well, Christmas is a massive thing there. And we are usually having a big Christmas party is always a big thing in the Philippines that they always look forward to as as a company. Companies throw these big Christmas parties, and we couldn't because of COVID. But what we did was our team and our managers put together at that time when 20 years old, we were around 200 employees and put together 200 Christmas baskets. And then we rented vans and personally delivered to all the homes directly of our employees. So it was trying to do those right things. And to your point, right? People see that, they see that we're making an effort, and we genuinely want to show that we care and appreciate what they're doing. And word of mouth is going to come from that.
One thing you said uh, ahead of this recording is that your ambition is to live, I'll quote you, a disciplined life of creation, connection, and learning to help you and others realize their full potential. So that seems a very specific phrase, right? Disciplined life of creation, connection, and learning. So kind of wondering, why those specific words? How did that come about, and how do you actually implement that in your daily existence?
Sure. No, it was I've always heard people, always had their own personal mission statements and what have you. And I'd never had one for a number of years. I kind of just sort of doing what I do, and do the right things, the right leading indicators, and the lagging things tend to happen. But I had an opportunity within an organization I'm a part of, EO Entrepreneurs Organization, where we have a forum we meet with every single month for 4 hours and discuss our 8 other business owners all in different industries. And we meet monthly and locally, but then we take retreats twice per year. And one of the retreats we took out to Aspen, Colorado, and there's a man named Finney and Kelly that has a program called the Intentionality Compass. And so we engaged him to support us in that retreat. And one of the things he has in the Intentionality Compass is a whole kind of workbook for you to answer a bunch of really challenging questions that he wanted all of us to do before we went to that retreat. And I put a ton of time into it. I probably spent a couple hours every morning for several weeks and just answering hard questions about who you are, what you care about, what would others say about you. Just a lot of just thoughtful writing, and out of that whole effort was to come your own personal mission statement. I mean, literally, write a list of 200 words that when you reflect back on who you are and what others say about you, and what you feel that is meaningful for you. And literally going through that whole journey ended up distilling it down to that phrase. And so to break it down, it's disciplined. And discipline to me, a lot of people think of discipline as sometimes a negative word, or this but discipline is just being committed and consistent. And so certainly fall short myself every time, but trying to live a disciplined life, and whatever you're doing, whether it's your health, whether it's parenting, whether it's growing a business, being consistent and committed. So disciplined life of creation, connection, and learning. And I just realized, and during that process, that reflective is, I do love creating tremendously. Creating companies, obviously, creating content, creating ideas. I mean, I'm one of those that, like, I can just sit in a room for 10 hours with a bunch of books and just think with a blank piece of paper in front of me. Like, I just love using my brain and seeing where it goes and what comes out of it. So I've had a history of just creating innovative, things, and enjoy doing that with others. Connection. I mean, I absolutely love connecting myself with other people, and I love connecting other people together. Actually, another whole business I haven't talked about that I started with a partner during COVID is this platform that, for any member-based organization, it collides members together at scale. Because any member-based organization, the values of members knowing themselves, and a lot of member-based organizations, people don't know one another, whether it's chambers of commerce or big mastermind groups. They know a fraction of people, and so this intentionally would introduce members at scale on every 2 weeks, monthly basis. And we found us doing it for the EO organization I'm a part of, and we've made over 15,000 connections globally, from New Zealand to Africa to Australia. So it's a business that it's in its infancy, but we're going to be taking globally, called One-on-One Connections. So it's just an outcrop of what I naturally like doing, and then learning. I mean, it goes without saying. One of my favorite phrases from the movie Shawshank Redemption is "Get busy living or get busy dying." And if you're not learning, I don't like what the other side of that is. And it's not just learning, for learning's sake. It's constant growth. I mean, my wife and I are constantly doing content together on parenting, which is, that is an interesting journey in today's world. Growing my business, leadership. I even have a leadership learning corner. We have a company chat with all 500 employees, and once or twice a week, I just do sharing. I have a series on my social media called Learning on the Run. When I go run, I run 2 to 3 miles every day, and I listen to a podcast. And when I'm done, I take a few minutes and I share the top takeaways, called Learning on the Run. I have sunrise reading. It's a series I do. Whatever I'm reading in content, just take a few pictures of it, my key takeaways, and I post it on social. So it keeps me accountable, and it just continues to bring new ideas. So discipline, life, creation, connection, learning to help myself and others realize our full potential. And I was very intentional about that phrase. And I know a lot of people, when they talk about having impact and purpose, it's always about putting everybody else, first, right? And I know it can be contradictory, but at the end of the day, if you don't have yourself right and you're not dialed in, then you're not really good to anybody else, whether it's your children, whether it's your employees, or otherwise. And so I know a lot of people that keep their bucket empty all the time, trying to fill others, but it's a disservice, and they're not ultimately realizing their full potential. So, I go back to the old, you get on the airplane and they tell you the rule whenever the oxygen falls, right? Put it on yourself and then put it on others beside you. So I've got to be on a path of realizing my full potential and being fulfilled, because I know that's when I'm best for others. Because the other relationships in my life, when I know that they are not fulfilled, that they're ultimately a disservice to those around us. So it's a journey together. It's helping others and myself together realizing our full potential, and it becomes a win-win.
So, Brad, thank you for that. It's a great explanation of a phrase you've obviously thought a lot about, and I resonate a lot with it. I mean, my own similar phrase includes creation and connection, in actually very similar. Here's my question for you. I'm going to slow you down a little bit in this moment just to really think about what's the answer to this question, because I know when I speak with my CEO clients, they're always fasting with their answer because they're spending their entire life responding to all these stakeholders. So I'll give you just a space to think about this question, which is, in a nutshell, it's going to be about what's holding you back from your full potential. As you might know, on the podcast, I'm always asking, like, how do you want to multiply the business or multiply your own impact? And I think we've talked a bit about that, getting to 40,000 employees and the impact that's going to make, in the Philippines, and also from the client side as well. But I suppose my question would be, what might be the stretch for you as you transition from the leader of a company with 500 people, perhaps to 1,000 people, to becoming the leader of business that's many times bigger than that? What are the things that you might need to work on, change? What are things getting in your way from creating that, would you say? What's your own inner journey going to be, would you say, over the next few years?
It's just mental expansion. I'm actually in the middle of a book right now that is at the heart of that topic, called 10x is easier than 2x: how world-class entrepreneurs do more with less. And it's I mean, I know it's very cliche and people talk about mindset, but it truly is in how you go about your day-to-day behaviors in life. And in this book by Dan Sullivan, which a lot of people may be familiar with, the founder of Strategic Coach, but it's done in conjunction with a PhD, Benjamin Hardy, PhD, who's an organizational psychologist. So you have this like brilliant business, icon, and this brilliant PhD psychologist doing these books together. And really, the essence of the message is, what is the 80%, right? It's back to the old Pareto rule, really auditing who you are.
What's the 20%, right? Yeah, what's the 20% that creates 80% of your results? Or even it's more like, what's the 1% that creates 50% of your results, even more? It's a good book. Yeah.
And it's like a lot of topics. It's clear. And this is a struggle. I think a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business owners, they get a lot of endorphin hits from content consumption, right? And so it's a lot easier to consume the next podcast, the next book, the next piece of information, to get those endorphin hits, while they just leave a whole litany of things, of unexecuted things behind them, right? Because it's a lot easier to go to that next conference, go to that next podcast, go listen to that next speaker, versus doing the hard work of like implementing what they've already got in front of them. And so, a lot of people know about the 80-20 rule, and yeah, you got to change the 80, but they don't take time to really do it. And so I'm really trying to force myself, and I even have a Google spreadsheet going, and actually an app on my phone that's called the 80% I'm changing. And it's trying to really audit and say, okay, here at 43 years old, about to be 44, what is the 80% that has served me well up until this point? But where I want to go next, and what I want to accomplish from a business standpoint, from a father standpoint, from a spouse standpoint. The example I want to set with my children, and what we talked about at the beginning before the podcast started, is just how critical it is with young people, to have an awareness about purpose and impact, and humility. So I'm really taking a list and I'm just looking at what are my daily behaviors? What are the things that I've done? Everything from my workout routine, allowing myself to skip sometimes, not being consistent of every single morning. I want to do 10 minutes of reading and 10 minutes of sitting on that. Well, you can see it there, upside down and do my breathing exercises that I just haven't done. But it's like, no, the 80% me allowed myself to skip on some of that stuff, right? The new, right? The 20% I'm going to double down on are the things that are going to serve me well and leave those other things behind, and the new mental frameworks. And it's hard as human beings. I mean, we default to homeostasis and wanting to stay. So this isn't a new concept by any means, but the execution of it, I think a lot of people don't take time to do. They just on to read the next book. They read this book and it's like, yeah, that's a great concept, then move on. I'm trying to marinate in it and really audit myself and take extreme ownership of what are the things I need to change and adjust, and what are some things that I want to keep that have served me well, but what are the things I need to change that have been my blockers kind of moving forward. So I'm in the middle of that journey right now, and actually, there's 3 books, and I would recommend to any entrepreneur. If I could go back to myself in my 20s, it is one of the best psychological foundations for any entrepreneur. That the 3 books that the 2 of them did together, the Gap and the Gain, Who Not How, and 10x is easier than 2x. Those 3 are going to be 3 that I'm listening to them in rotation on my runs every morning. As I get through, I go back through it, and I'm keeping it pounding in my head and thinking through that framework, because all 3 of those are super powerful, especially the Who Not How. As you get older, like, it's not about the how, it's who's, the relationship equity that I've built in my life over the last 43 years. I'm within one message of a who that can pretty much get anything done in any direction. I just have the discipline to need to focus on it.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing those things. Yeah, I actually read quite an in-depth review on that book of the 80/20, the 10x is easier than 2x book, because it just speaks so much. It's the Impact Multiplier podcast. Multiplication, it's at the heart of what I'm about and what X Quadrant is about. It's the X, and the X Quadrant actually stands for multiplication, right? Amongst other things.
What about the execution side? I'm curious, Richard, to flip it back to you, since you've done such a deep resonation on that. And this is the thing, even an organization I'm a part of, like EO, and we have tons of speakers and tons of content and so forth. It's just the ongoing consumption, right? And honestly, feel like it ends up being, you got a lot of entrepreneurs that just they don't get on the execution train. They continue on the consumption train of things. So in your review of it, what have you observed, and even with your clients that you work with as well, that's been that trigger point that actually causes those that actually execute and do it versus just consuming the content, moving on to the next piece?
There's always an identity shift that has to happen if you're going to radically shift the way that we operate. I see it all the time with my clients, right? And that's why, to some degree, actually, I think it's okay for a while to be reading books, to be listening to podcasts, if it's basically marinating you, immersing you in a different world, just as you do on your runs, listen to those books, whatever, on repeat. And I think that's why, again, one of the things I think is quite unique about Rivendell, my own CEO community, is because everybody there has committed to that 10x journey almost before they arrive, right? So that's a world, again, where you're there. Not every entrepreneur in the world wants to play that game, needs to play that game. Not every entrepreneur wants to multiply their impact in different directions, financially, but also socially and, relationally and everything else. So I think part of it is getting yourself in an environment, both the content that you consume and the people that you're with. And then the deeper work is like, actually, we got to look at how do we see ourselves? What's the fear? What's the payoff we've been looking for all our life? So, for example, in many of us, we're high achievers. We get the buzz of ticking things off, hitting the numbers, getting a better result this quarter than we got last quarter. All those are good things. But when they become the drivers, suddenly, okay, am I prepared to actually go beyond that, even possibly failing in the short term, not hitting my numbers because I'm on a bigger mission? I do it repeatedly in my business. It's damn scary, right? So I could stay here and have this impact, and everyone be, wow, that's really impressive, Richard, already. Why would you want to do any more? But I'm like, yeah, but I want to change the world. And so I want to work with the leaders who are changing the world. And so even more, right? And therefore reinventing myself and doing that, I have to leave behind revenue streams that are profitable, ways of enrolling clients that worked at one level, but might not be the thing if I'm going to serve at my highest. So I think pursuing contribution is really important. and getting really clear. I think there's always the comfort zone and there is the greatness zone, I call it, right? And the point is, we only get to the greatness zone, actually, first of all, if we really get clear about who are we trying to impact. Because if it's just about ourselves, at some point we run out of that, we run out of fuel on that journey, if you ask me.
No, thanks for that reflection, and I think that the essence of really making it happen, as you shared at the beginning of that, is I think you have to do it with other people. I think even the most driven, motivated, disciplined individuals, which I consider myself to be one, pretty disciplined, can certainly, without having accountability, without having others you're doing it with to hold each other accountable, can be distracted in a zillion different ways. I mean, attention is the number one valuable thing these days that can be distracted. So like what you're doing with your Rivendell community, which is fantastic, and like what I'm doing with EO and others a part of, is I think that's the main message. Is you can talk about what all needs to happen, but unless you're doing it with someone else and have an accountability partner, it's likely to not happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brad, it's been a great conversation. Let me ask you, if people want to get in touch with you or find out more about your business, where do they go to do that?
Sure. Lots of channels where we exist out there. We actually create for any podcasts and all the speaking and stuff that I do, we actually created an email address just called tools@outsourceaccess.com. So if people just send an email, you don't have to write a message or anything. Just write an email to tools@outsourceaccess.com and just put a multiplier in the subject line, kind of know where we came from, and we'll send you just a whole bunch of resources on the whole world of how does outsourcing work. I mean, the biggest thing is a lot of people know that it exists. We're beyond top of funnel. The next question is just how does this actually work? And so I can send you an email to that. We'll send you a link to a bunch of resources, a recorded webinar where I'd go through about 30 different case studies, a template of how to get started. Actually, a whole mini curriculum I created based on Jim Collins, any Jim Collins fans that are out there. So just a bunch of resources we can send your way. But aside from that, just go to outsourceaccess.com. You can, if you find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, I'm posting constantly on content under Brad Stevens. I'm sure we'll put it in the show notes as well. And then automatedelegate.com if you want to check out a podcast, very, very tactical focused. And I interview guests on exactly, give me 3 ways you're automating and delegating in your life and exactly how you're doing it and which tools you're using. Love to spread the word on that as well.
Brad, that's perfect. Really enjoyed our conversation today. I think there's been a lot of things which we've looked at, from your early days, selling your toy, you're renting out your toys in 4th grade, all the way through to this aha moment of seeing the impact of outsourcing, with One Life in the Philippines, and then building out from there with the United Nations goals, with very own intentionality. And then this last part here where we've been talking about, well, what's it like to live that 10x journey? That whole idea of when you're on that exponential curve, behind you looks flat and ahead of you looks vertical. And so it really requires some very different ways of thinking and operating and leading. And thank you for being honest that, you're on that journey as well, right? There's expansion and a shedding of that old self that we have to do at any stage along that process, and that you're on that journey along with the rest of us. So appreciate your time and look forward to following along as the journey evolves for you.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks for making the effort to do this subject matter for your podcast. And I know a lot of fellow entrepreneurs and CEOs I'd love to send your way to have the same experience. So appreciate the work that you're doing and continue to spread the word.
Thanks, man. Take care. Bye-bye.
Well, that's a wrap. If you received value from this conversation, please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'd deeply appreciate it. And if you'd like to check out the show notes from this episode, head to xquadrant.com/podcast, where you'll find all the details. Now, finally, when you're in top leadership, who supports and challenges you at a deep level to help you multiply your impact? Discover more about the different ways we can support you at xquadrant.com.